Hey everyone, and welcome back to No Capes, the show where we talk about creator-owned comics with creators who own comics. And with me today are two fantastic creators who I've been very eager to talk to this season, starting with Bri Tippetts, someone whose monster designs tickle me to no end, and I can't wait to see more in other books. Bri, tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name's Bri Tippetts, and I just love anything horror or comics, and I just really enjoy to make them as well.
Excellent. I've really loved the design that you've come up with, and we'll dive into this in a second, but I really liked the creature in this. And of course, with me is, for some of you, a man who needs no introduction, but it's a man who knows that the only way to talk about comics is by reading them, and the only way to read comics is by buying them. Make some noise for Josh Ruben.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
You're very
Us.
welcome. Josh, tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your book.
Well, I'm a filmmaker and a comedian and noisemaker on occasion, writer, and Darla is a twisted kind of EC Comics inspired tale about an irritable small town woman who, after a factory accident, goes a bit mad in the confines of her home. Uh, con- Including conversing with a entity in her house, a monster that may or may not live in her garage slash living room.
Yeah, that was interesting seeing that develop throughout the course of Darla. I really loved that. And Bri, tell everyone a little bit about your side of the book as well before we dive into the story too much. Like, what inspired you with the way that you did everything here?
Well, I had some director decks that Josh had originally sent me, which I kind of played with those and using that kind of imagery just to inspire the style of what the characters would look like and kind of give an ode to his original imagery for it. And then I kind of added in my own little twist of my own style just to make it a little more me, I guess.
Yeah, I really love the way that it's come. I love the color choices as well. Like I love the saturation in the art in Darla. And geez, there's so much I could say about it, but I'm just gonna show everyone a little bit here. So we've got the introduction that we've done here with the little note. So was that something you guys came up with together? Was that something in your original notes, Josh? Like how did this page come about?
It actually wasn't. That was one of the many contributions that my buddies at Invader Comics, our publisher, brought to the table and offered. Specifically, Mike Perkins, who's a big comic head, the comic, real comic expert. I mean, they all are, but he was the one to kind of say, what about a note to set the tone for what this thing is, because it's a different kind of uh, uncomfortably chilling, kind of darkly comic gallows humor type tone. Much like he also brought to the table the idea of sort of chapter breaks or
Mm.
tone breaks. Like, we didn't have these like full page images to kind of cliffhang and break up the story in the beats originally. We just, kind of essentially transcribed the story as it was originally intended to be a film, and then culled it down, edited into what it is now.
Very cool. I really like sort of finding out about those little behind as a comics creator myself as well. I haven't had a chance to
Mhm.
work with many editors yet. But I was literally just talking to an editor friend of mine who was going through one of my scripts yesterday, and he had some really fascinating feedback and input on the story. So it's always really cool to hear from creators like yourselves about those little
Mm.
tidbits and tweaks that the editors and the publishers had to like bring your vision into the world. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, they brought a ton to the table. It was invaluable for sure. It's a big learning curve for me.
Yeah, understandably, 'cause, I mean, it's always interesting that sort of pivot from comics to script writing for TV and then film to comics as well. How similar did you find script writing from film to TV, to comics?
I mean, what's similar about it is it's a visual medium. Filmmaking is a visual medium, much like you'd storyboard a film. You can close your eyes and see the thing playing out in your mind, and then you go execute it. It wasn't too dissimilar here, but so much was put in Bree's court. Part of why I was so excited to work with Bree was just, uh, first of all, to get into this medium, into the graphic novel comic medium, was just super exciting to me as a fan. But that's just the way to do it. Your artist is your partner. It's completely 50-50, if not 60-40. It's Bri's medium more than anything. And so a lot of the times I'd be sort of deferential, and then much like being in an edit, I'd sort of say, here's how we can emphasize this image or push a little bit, make it feel a little bit more visceral, et cetera, et cetera. And then, then much like a studio would, the publishers, our buddies at Invader, came in and then pushed it a bit more. And
Yeah,
we'd either
cool.
push back on notes we didn't agree with, which is extremely rare, or, oftentimes accept their notes, and it made it just immensely better.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. So, Bri, with this note page as well, like I love the little stains on the note and the little Polaroids and newspaper clippings and stuff at the base. So I'm just going to take a minute on this page because it's just such a cool beginning to the book. Where did you draw inspiration from? Like, what made you decide this was the direction to go?
Well, Josh wanted to add a note in the front, like he said. Mike had kind of advised it, and he kind of wanted it to look like a note to the reader themselves. And then, so that's where I got the paper, and he added the idea for the little, like, smudges and the little dirt added to it, which I thought was a nice touch. But the pictures was kind of just a little, like, just alluding to stuff later where she's looking through the boxes of like photos and newspapers. I don't know if I'm allowed to spoil that stuff.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
but uh but yeah, it was just alluding to stuff that would later be imagery in the book, and just kind of giving a little more backstory to her relationship with her daughter and stuff through the pictures.
Yeah, cool. I really love that. That was a really clever touch. Well done.
Thank you so much.
And of course, the headstone for Pickle. I was reading it in bed and I looked away for a second as I'd flick to the next page, and then my partner was like, "Pickle? What is Pickle?" And I looked down, I was like, "Oh no, the dog is dead."
Just gives everybody a sense of what the hell they're getting into. It's like, oh, a dead dog, a supernatural entity, an irritable, mildly racist woman, and small town politics and mental health. It's just like, who knows how this thing is going to be received? But the fact that you're excited enough about it to have us on and talk about it is like, yes.
Yeah, no, literally, as soon as I saw any of the previews that were floating around, I was just like, yeah, we need to talk about this. And like, but aside from this as well, is like seeing what I saw, and then when I got to read the book, I knew that when we got to sit down and talk about Monster after this, that you guys were both going to have some really cool insights into the book, and that it was going to be a really fun chat. So I am very excited. So it's my honor to have you both on the show.
Thank you so much for having
Happy
us.
to be here. Yeah.
It's really interesting the way that you've set the tone in like the first 3 pages too, because like you said, you've got that note. Then we've got the headstone of the beloved family pet, or at least we assume it's a beloved family pet. And then straight into the brain scan.
Yeah, which actually wasn't originally the way the book began. It doesn't spoil anything, but it began with an establishing shot of the clinic, a car rolling up, and what you'll later see. That first image is still in the book. Darla getting out and dropping her key, and cursing the heavens before she walks in and kind of goes to her doctor's appointment. But it was Mike and Kevin at Invader who said, no, get right into it, get to the compelling imagery of the CAT scan, get right into, start in the middle essentially, which is such a great way to begin any story. And
Yeah.
it is very effective.
Yeah, I do have to admit that I love a story that drops me right in the shit, and then I get to find out the context as it goes. And that was what my editor said to me yesterday, actually. A big shout out to my buddy Gary, who was reading through my stuff. He said, get in late and get out early.
Yeah, great advice.
And I really liked the way that was put. And that's what I've noticed in short comics is a really key thing. Like, just get dropped in the middle of the action and then stop before it peters on too much, and just leave on that high note. And I found that to be really enjoyable, and you guys have done a great job with it with this too.
Oh, thank
you. I love to hate Mrs. Demrod.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. I've gone on record many a time just because it's like it's a tricky thing to get into without getting into politics, which I'm not interested in doing. This is the type of person, regardless of where anybody sits on the political spectrum and what their beliefs are, that's less of a concern. The love relationship love-hate relationship I have with this person. I've gone on, certainly on record, to be like, man, she's such an asshole. I both love and hate her. There are so many people like her, you know, some here in the States might call them Karens, women like Darla. But ultimately I think, you know, it's where it sits in my kind of realm of thinking, it's just kind of a heartbreaking type anti-hero to a degree. You know, she's such a tragic character, and yet it's also kind of fun in her irritable sensibility to just
Yeah.
watch her kind of fail and falter and flub.
Yeah, exactly. I was watching through this, reading through it, and I was like, I am greatly entertained by Darla, but I wouldn't want to be on the other end of Darla.
Yeah,
Fair.
yeah, fair.
Yeah. Yeah. And the characterization, Bri, that you've got in the faces and the expressions and energy of each character is really, really cool. I love how expressive they are.
Yeah, I had a teacher who, when I started getting into comics in college, was very much like, think of it like anime, like very over the top, expressive. Like you really want people to know and feel, almost too much feel what's going on in their head. So I really tried to up that.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I love like in the doctor's office, that immediate flirtiness that Darla's trying to go for with the doctor. You know,
yeah, I mean, you know, it reminded me of that interaction specifically. There was a Mike Nichols movie called Wit, and Mike Nichols, who's a brilliant director, is no longer with us, but he brought up something about that interaction, the patient-doctor interaction specifically. It just plays into the theme of like Darla's isolation and loneliness, and really just, despite what kind of a person she is, she really is just trying to connect with people. You'll see a lot of the time she's left alone and isolated in many frames, and that's very much on purpose. And even beyond like any kind of flirtation, it's just like trying to connect with anyone. And what Mike was talking about with his particular project, Wit, was like doctors will come in and ask you how you're doing, and not quite, you know, they'll just keep their eyes on the clipboard, not really connect. And so I thought, okay, well, that's a pretty great way to get right in, to see a character's want interrupted by, you know, her world beyond.
Yeah, that was really cool. And I gotta say that I do really love those, like you were saying, the full page like chapter breaks. And like having read the whole book now, going back to this first page break, I really love this scene here with the, you know, the pipes and the sitting water alluding to the other things that are happening within the town. And one of my favorite things about the pages so far has been, Bri, like you've got everything that you need in the page and nothing more, but the key details that you choose to include, I really, really like. I really love that efficiency of space and art. You know, it's like nothing's cluttered, but the things you need and like the things you really want the reader to notice are all there, and that's really cool.
Thank you. That's one of my favorite things in film, so if I can hide it in my art, it's always kind of...
No, I really love that. That's like, you know, there's not too many things here in the car park, but like, you know, you see the keys and a few other items in sort of showing off how clumsy Darla can be, and then Vern going past and giving Darla that quizzical expression. It's just, yeah, like it's I can't think of the filmmaker it's reminding me of right now, but like there's sort of a dramedy style that I could just see, like a sort of a slow motion of that car driving past with the driver just sort of looking as he goes past. And you really captured that vibe in your art, and it gives, like, while not trying to be a film, it still feels very cinematic. And I really like that.
Thank you. Yeah, I try to, with my comics, make it like a film. Like, that's something that like there could be more crossover of with comics, is just like utilizing what we have with you know.
Yes, 100%. One comic of recent time that actually I think you'll both really enjoy, liking horror, that does that really well is Eat My Flesh, Drink My Blood. It's by a friend of mine, Frankie White, who's actually my first author that I worked with as an artist. But it's
a great title.
It is, and it's kind of, it's like an A24 book in comic film in comic book form.
Love that. Ooh, I love the art. Look at that. Yes.
Adam Markowitz is a fantastic artist, and AHG does a really, really amazing color work. The team of the three of them together never fail. Adam was actually the artist for my longest comic that I've done so far, and I colored his work. It's a pleasure to work with Adam, but these three guys working together are always an excellent team. But yeah, they went for sort of the wide shot, and then that indie horror film cold open with the titles.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that.
It's a very cool book. I've actually recorded an episode about it for this season, which will be coming out sometime after your episode. So if you have read it anytime soon, definitely come back. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we talk about, because they did a really cool job. It's very spooky. It's very culty. Generational trauma sort of touched on, that sort of thing. It's some fascinating stuff. And
yeah, that art is cool.
Yeah, and that's what I love about so much indie horror that's coming out right now. So I was really like, this book I was delighted to read, because I like indie horror at the moment, because there are so many artists where at first glance you wouldn't imagine that to be a horror book, and that's what lends so much impact to what's going on in the story. And I love that, because there are so many books that you look at them and go, oh yeah, that's a horror book. That's going to be a horror book.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of pick what's happening throughout. And so that pleasure of reading Darla was like not really knowing exactly what was coming, because it wasn't like the tropes weren't the same exactly. And like the visual signifiers that were in most horror books were done so much differently here. And that was really enjoyable and fun. And I loved it.
Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I saw Beau is Afraid, Ari Aster's film recently. It actually, this feels like weirdly a companion piece to it, because it's in such a farcical, high anxiety, scary world. It still has a foot in groundedness, and yet it really goes there, doesn't pull punches. It was just really nice to see that in film, and nice to see, that's the great thing about A24 in particular, just taking those swings and working with filmmakers like that. If there's an appetite for that type of darkly comic psychological thriller, like we're there for it for sure. If you could drive that home in graphic novel form, that's the dream. And it feels like you can kind of get away with it more. I'm not sure how Darla would do. I mean, it would be a dream to see some filmmaker, if I could produce for them down the road, adapt a Darla, if they were so inspired. But it's almost like, there are certain stories are almost made for certain mediums, and this is like one where I feel like we could get away with it. Darla's one. It's kind of, almost as a somewhat of a segue into monsters. It's like, I don't know if, I'm sure someone will make a monsters something someday. It just came out. There's a whole world there you could certainly build, especially with HBO's Watchmen and such. But it's also so intense and so bleak, and so there's I don't know, some stories are just made for the medium, and it's
100%.
It's cool to have one foot in the door there.
Yeah, and that's what I like. I completely agree with you. It's like, yeah, some stories translate to film well, some stories translate to animation well, but some stories need to be a comic book. Especially there's some things you can do with the page turn in a lot of books that are just, you can't do it in film without it being a jump scare, which isn't necessarily what you're trying to achieve with the page turn. And there's some really interesting things. And I like, looking now actually, like I like what you guys did with starting to show Darla's anxiety and trauma and how she thinks the TV's talking to her. But also just visually, I'm going to touch on this for a second. The panel at the bottom of page 9, where he's on the TV and she's starting to talk to it, and he said, I said, you're goddamn wonderful. I love what you did messing with the panel borders and stuff, with the TV popping up into the panel above. I really love clever messing with guttering and stuff, and I really like that. I like that a lot.
Oh, yeah, me too. Anytime I can add that in, I'll do it. This is a good book for that.
Yeah, I really like that, and there's a few instances of that throughout the book that I really love. One of my favorite books that's ever done something really clever with that was actually one that I'd never read. Again, same thing. A guest suggested it to me because they really wanted to talk about it. It's called Witch Hat Atelier, and it's a manga that I would never have picked up otherwise, and I've now read every single volume of. And they had a panel out after the page turn. That's the first time the art in a book has ever made me laugh out loud because of how goddamn clever it was. And so, like, I really love seeing clever uses of guttering and clever messing with the context of the frames and borders and things like that. So you've done a great job with that here.
Well, thank you. Yeah, touching on monsters a little, I feel like they did a lot of that too. Like I have some new ideas where I'm like, ooh, I kind of want to play with these kind of borders more, or this use of line, and or
Yeah,
lack thereof.
100%. I've got another horror that I want to write in the near future, and I want to sit down and reread Monsters before doing so because there was some really interesting graphic shorthand and the way that they did borders and panels and that sort of
Yeah.
thing that I want to really take in before I start drawing it.
It's such an amazing there's so many surprising techniques in this format, in graphic novel comic format, that convey memory so well, and like ethereal states of mind. And I don't know, there's sometimes, you know, they're what I would struggle with. I can imagine myself struggling with as a filmmaker, and yet, you know, comic makers like Barry Windsor-Smith, illustrators, just make it seem so kind of so effortless. It's just
Yeah,
kind of wild. It's a testament to the story too, but it's just the wonderful thing about this medium. I mean, it can still surprise. You can still find jump scares and moments to be moved and moments to be kind of, you know, really really disturbed, which there were several moments in this one. But it's you know, not a medium to be underestimated by any means, and it
yeah,
consistently surprises me.
100%. Have you either of you read The Autumnal?
No.
It's a horror from Vault. I think you'll both really dig it. Chris Sheehan is the artist and does some amazing work. The whole team is incredible. They never miss.
The
Again, like that.
autumnal.
Yeah, it was the original cover for volume 1 of that book got banned on Amazon because they thought it was too much.
Oh wow,
Wow, wow.
that's a new goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, truly.
But it's a fantastic book. I did an episode on that last season. It's a really cool, another sort of look into small towns and people's sort of weird beliefs and that culty history
Mm-hmm.
and the occult in America. And it was a fascinating read. So I think you both really enjoy that.
Amazing. Love it.
Um, Now I'm going to give for Darla the usual a spoiler warning that I give for other books as well, because it's something that I do really want to talk about before we move on to monsters. So if you haven't read Darla yet, go and pick it up, digital, hardcover, whatever. Go and grab a copy right now, read it, and then come back and watch the rest of this episode because I don't want to spoil this part for you. So I'm going to give you a 5 count. Okay, they're gone. All right, I'm going to flick forward because I want to talk about that creature design. But first, also, I love the latex monster masks page.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, a
Yeah,
little bit of my monster kid coming out.
yeah. I'm a big Hammer horror fan. I'm like want to work on a whole series of like those classic creature feature prints, and I love seeing other people's takes on the sort of classic style monsters. And so this was great.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a little bit inspired too. Just I like to, when I can, get like old monster magazines and stuff, and it's funny to see the ads in those. And it was kind of a take on how silly some of them can seem now, but back then it would have been like so epic to get one of those masks as a
Right?
kid.
Oh my God, yeah, complete. And it was also, that was something that Bri just kind of brought to the table because it was, oh, hello. It was something that you know, that Bri was excited to bring to the table. It was like, yes, like all day. Oh my God, bring all the ads you want, all the weirdness, break it up however you want. It was like so surprising. Like the haunted phone, like
Yeah, I
I
loved
couldn't
that. That
I
was
couldn't write
awesome.
that myself. Yeah,
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. If you guys ever decide to do a Darla extended universe, give me a haunted phone short.
Yes, yeah, just
Yeah.
in the background.
Yeah, that would be very cool. So, where did the creature design come from? I've got that first sort of appearance on page 32 where Darla's like, "Ain't you a spooky sight?" And I really want to know more about it.
Do you want me to take it or do you?
I mean, yeah, Bri, you're the one who brought so much to the table as far as it, because I mean, I think my only references in my visuals were largely the Babadook, right?
Yeah,
And just how like the shadow play on it was specifically, but I don't even remember
Australia
if I brought much
represent.
more than that.
yeah. And then I kind of went a little too Donnie Darko with like Frank the Bunny style because the ears were
Yeah.
up at first, and so I had to kind of bring them down and almost but it kind of worked out because it made it more dog-like and kind of
Mm.
plays with the concept of her missing pickle and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that. I like how it seems to be mostly made of shadow, but like there's the fleshy bits around the eyes. Like that's really unsettling.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like almost like a smog monster, except for
Yeah.
the very kind of, yeah, eerily uh, anatomical kind of elements to, like, God, yeah, the thing has eyelids and like just milky white eyes, just like, wow, this
Yeah.
thing lives in this like weird red world.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I'm not going to skip forward to it because I don't want to show too much of the book so people could actually go and read it. But I think if I remember rightly, there's a scene later where it's also got like the fleshy mouth and some teeth happening.
Anyway, to add in a little bit of grotesqueness and
Yeah,
like
it
picture feel.
it was a fantastic design. And if Invader ever wants to do anything really interesting for this book, let's make a statue of that creature.
Ooh, yeah. Little Mondo.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, if they do, then they want to send one to get painted up. I'd love to paint one on stream because that would be fun as
Oh,
hell.
wow, that'd be dope. That'd be so dope. Hey, when the thing comes out, we were originally supposed to debut in stores on May 31st, and now it's like about June 21st, I think. So once those positive reviews hopefully start coming in, or lack thereof, all press is good press. Then maybe there'll be a whole movement for the Darla entity.
I think it's going to get a really good response. Like this was a really fun book. And yeah, the I love how unsettling the creature was, but how not present it was as well. Like it was such an important part of the book, but it's only there a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so
It's
like
like a Jack Nicholson cameo in A Few Good Men. It's like maybe he'll get an Academy Award nomination, but it's like total screen time about 5 minutes.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like it's such an integral part of the book, and the book wouldn't be this book without it. But I love how sparingly it was used to very strong effect.
Well, Josh had given a reference to the film, I think it was Night House, and just that idea of how it like is interacting with the characters and it's there, but it's not, like you said, really totally there. It's kind of got its own thing going on.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's very cool. And I love the cracking and thumping of the walls throughout the story as Darla is sort of maybe connecting with this entity more, or maybe the brain damage is having more of an effect. The illness is having more of an effect. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, the tragedy of drinking toxic water in our world,
Yeah,
on top of medication, on top of an accident, it's all kind of amorphous, but it could be many things, or maybe it's real. Who knows?
exactly. And there's a lot going on there. And I really appreciated how briefly, but like how well you touched on issues like toxic masculinity and like LGBT anti attitudes and things like that with Darla's husband and the neighbor and stuff. It was really cool, a really interesting way of attacking that.
Thank you. Yeah, there's an American Beauty element to it, I think, in that degree. It's like nothing is quite as it seems. That was one of those things as a writer, you kind of follow your fingers and just kind of figure out, and you discover, is like, that Stephen King archaeology metaphor that sometimes writing is dusting off the bones and just kind of discovering it, and that all that stuff kind of came out, which is, I think, the wonderful, tragic, hypocritical reality of these small towns where nothing is quite as it seems. Everyone's sort of black and white, or should I say like red, white, and blue, and yet everything is way more diverse and way more colorful than just those three colors.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And well, the sort of the last thing I want to touch on here is that before we move on to monsters, because we've only got so much time, is that Bri, I love everything that you've done with this book as well. The writing is fantastic. The synergy between writing and art is fantastic. So I love the story that you've both put together together. But I really loved your art style throughout this book. I can't wait to see you do more horror. And my partner was just talking last night about how horror and comedy are kind of two sides of the same coin. And
Yes.
I hope one day to see the pair of you team up again for a straight comedy as well, because I feel like that would be incredibly fun.
I've
A
never
straight
done
comedy book, yeah.
Yeah, just full all out absurdist humor, you know, something a bit wild. I think that would be very, very fun, and I think that you guys would knock it out of the park.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I've
It'd be
never
so
done
fun.
comedy, but I'd be down.
Yeah, I mean, Bri, your work is so inherently, it has that comedic expressiveness to it. It would be super funny. I don't think I could possibly do straight comedy in this medium without bringing in all the things we can't afford in film, like, talking ghoul heads and dragons and tornadoes and all kinds of things. But it would be, hey, maybe that would be
That would be awesome. That's the
something we could
beauty of
do.
comics.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing.
Do like with all that stuff, you could do like an ultimate stoner comic 'cause there's not a whole ton of like
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just called Blissed Out.
yeah.
Yeah, that would be super fun. So I will link the stores to go get Darla and stuff in the description below for those of you that are watching. So go get a copy of it today. Give these folks some support, and make sure that they get to make more comics, because that's what it's all about. And so I'm
Yes,
going
please.
to hide Darla now, so everyone can get ready for us to talk about monsters. And now for a word from our sponsors. No Capes is proudly sponsored by Global Comics, one of the coolest new comics sales and distribution platforms that is out there. It has a really, really cool new web reader, and they're working on an amazing new mobile app for you to read your comics on your favorite mobile devices. And of course, if you're a creator like me, it is so creator friendly. You can upload your comics in PDF format and have them ready for sale and reading within minutes. And my favorite feature of all, profit distribution. You can split the profits between the creative team without having to manually transfer money back and forth, and make sure that every member of your creative team for your comic gets paid for every sale you make on your book. They have some amazing creators on there, like Band of Bards, Mad Cave Studios, Valiant, and even some image books are getting on there now. So go check it out at globalcomics.com. And if you want to give it a try, hit the link below in the description to enter this week's giveaway for one of 3 free subscriptions, or hit the other link in the description to get your discounted Global Comics subscription today. So, thanks Global Comics for sponsoring the show. Let's get back to the episode. So, Barry Windsor-Smith is just an absolute legend and staple in this industry. And I am beyond excited to start talking about this book with you, because, like you said, like this is a relatively new book of Barry's, right? Just came out, I believe Josh said.
2021, yeah, not too long ago.
Yeah, and Barry has been in the industry for probably longer than I've been reading comics, let's be honest. It's a real testament to, it's a real prime example of the complexity and intricacy of his work, both visually and as a writer. So it's a really cool book, but I'm going to turn it over to the both of you to give everyone the cliff notes about what this book's about before we dive in.
Oh man. I mean, it's about so much. This book was introduced to me by a Fangoria contributor named Rich, who's amazing. I actually interviewed Bri and I recently. Rich Pieces, if you want to reach out to him, follow him, for introducing this nightmare to us. But he mentioned that this was originally an Incredible Hulk origin story, but it actually ended up kind of being too dark and too intense and too bleak, I believe, for maybe it was Marvel, maybe it was just for commercial audiences. But I guess my swing at a plot breakdown would be it's sort of a a wartime era saga monster tale that spans a series of years and has to do with a conspiracy effort from the Nazis to turn normal human beings into creatures, and then how that sort of trauma perpetuates. But there's so much more. It jumps to the past, it jumps to the future, it deals with the supernatural, it deals with psychic and kinetic energy, and it's in essence everything that I love about comic books, because it just brings everything in it, that the kitchen sink, but he makes it work.
Yeah, it really does. Like, I couldn't believe how many elements, all the different like major fantastical things
Yeah.
happen with a very small cast of characters, which was impressive.
Yeah.
Well, and just seeing how connected they were was the craziest part to me. Like, it kind of alludes to it at the beginning, and you're like, oh, okay, the like newspaper article kind of alludes to their connection, but then it gets crazier and crazier, and you just realize just how intertwined they all are in such a big way.
And it worked. It isn't messy by any means, yet he brings in all the elements of really anything that makes a great sweeping genre tale. Violence and romance and gunfire, monster gore.
Yeah.
It sort of has so much.
Yeah, it is. It's jam packed with all the exciting elements of probably all our favorite sort of stories. It is told in a much darker tone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a quick warning for anyone who hasn't read the book. It does deal with a lot of heavy topics. It deals with them with care and well, but it doesn't shy away from them. It is set in like the 60s, 70s. So there is a lot of still talk about Nazis and their experiments. There's still a lot of racism. There's still a lot of misogyny and homophobia because of the time period it's set in. So it is a very good book, but if you're not looking for a heavy read, I wouldn't recommend it. But if you are up for dealing with those heavier topics, excellent book. Very good read, well worth the read. Just sort of brace yourself, or if it starts getting a bit much, take a break, go outside for a bit, get some fresh air. Just make sure you prepare yourself for how intense the book can be. But otherwise, dive right in. It's an absolutely incredible book.
Yeah, it's I've found it to be an escape the way that, some of Stephen King's more intense stories can be an escape. Like it gets about as intense as a story like It or Moments in Salem's Lot, dealing with everything from child abuse to domestic abuse and racism and the like. And then there's, all the kind of great escapist stuff we love about genre. But you phrased it really well. I mean, he did handle it with care. Separately for a beat, I was so shocked at how gigantic it was, and I went to our local comic book store. I mean, just for reference, I have a giant head, and it's twice the size. It's a giant book. I mean, he must have spent 16 years on it if he just put it out recently. But something for the bookshelf, a mainstay for sure.
Yeah, I cannot wait to get a copy of it. It's $100 here.
Whoa. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. It was expensive. You could get it on Amazon for something like $30, and yet, I wanted to support our local spot who special ordered it. So it ended up being like closer to 40. And I was like, well, I mean, thing's gonna live on my shelf. It's kind of like an art book.
Yeah, exactly. I can get it on Amazon for significantly less than that, but I'd rather, like you said, support my local store.
Yeah.
But none of the actual brick and mortar stores here have it for less than $90.
Wow. Yeah.
Comics are expensive in Australia.
Yeah. Well, shipping this thing would cost probably $90 alone. So.
Yeah. A single floppy in Australia can go for anywhere between $6 and $10.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last Marvel one I bought was like $7 just for a single floppy. So it gets
yeah.
We're here,
yeah. So I bought the digital, but as soon as I opened up the Kindle book, I was like, 400 odd pages? Jesus.
Yeah. You get your money's worth to that degree.
You really do. It's definitely worth it. It's a huge book. It's an intense book, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily got a happy ending, but it's got a satisfying ending.
Bri, yeah, I think so. It was kind of, I mean, not to jump to that point, but I was a bit surprised by how I wouldn't say it. I feel like it semi stuck the landing. There was kind of it was just an odd prose to end on, but a beautiful scene and a beautiful moment. I love the way that it did end up. I mean, there's so much to say without jumping around too much. You get your share of violence and gore, but I wanted even more monster stuff. I think I was expecting the Bobby Bailey, who essentially in essence is this sort of hulkish character, to like wreak Frankenstein like violence on this small town. And there's I appreciate that it wasn't just that, but I was expecting that like Act 3 kick-ass kind of a sequence, and you don't get too much of that. But to that degree, I mean, it's so original in execution, and studio people say well told.
Yeah, it really was. I found that fascinating. Like I went in expecting more of that action and violence, but
Yeah,
it ended up being honestly more of a drama and a bit of a thriller than anything,
yeah,
and that was really
truly.
fascinating. Bri, as an artist, what was your sort of favorite overall aspect of the book before we get into story specifics?
Man, there's so many visually stunning things about it. It's kind of hard
Hmm.
to choose, but like I said, just his use of borders or lack thereof, and how to use it to connect dialogue. Also, his use of dialogue, how he did something kind of non-traditional with the bubbles, where they wouldn't always flow where you'd think they would, but you still kind of followed and understood through the imagery. He just so creative visually.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's really really interesting the way that it's done throughout this book. Look, I'm going to warn everyone now as well. I have to use the Kindle reader for this. So some of the stuff that we talk about, you're not going to get to see because the way the Kindle reader works only lets me show one half of the book. So we might be talking about the right hand page while all you can see is the left hand page. I'm sorry about that, but that's the Kindle reader for you. It's not very podcast friendly. But it is an amazing book, and honestly, not being able to see every page is probably going to be good for you because you'll get surprised.
Hmm.
Let me get rid of that placeholder image. Straight away, the image just on the inside cover with the title again, with the guy's face all bruised up. The amount of
Hmm.
detail that Barry's put into that one image is phenomenal.
Hmm. Hmm.
I have to say, as an artist, that I am forever sad and in awe of how amazing Barry is with hatching and portraying Shadow with hatching. It is the
Mm.
bane of my existence.
He's
And it's all
Yeah, it's through everything. I'm going to skip straight to the double page spread for these first couple of pages because they're incredible. The amount of detail just immediately in the first page of the book. Yeah,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
1949, and it is the story of, it's kind of the story of Bobby Bailey, but it's kind of the story of everyone that Bobby Bailey grew up with more.
Mm-hmm. And kind of intersected with his life in his orbit,
Yeah, and it's
tangentially or otherwise, which is so fun. I mean, it kind of is like the Magnolia of horror opuses, not to steal from like Zach Kreger's upcoming, film plot or pitch, but it has that kind of a scope in that in a way. Not so much Altman as like a worse comp, but yeah, Magnolia-esque. That, if you're familiar with the P.T. Anderson movies, the many characters and the intersecting. I think beyond anything, sometimes I feel like reading these books, reading graphic novels, you get one more of the other. You get a bit more quality, let's say, in the writing than you do in the illustration. Not often, but often I find more in the illustration than satisfaction in the writing. And this was like bang on for both.
yeah,
It's really, really well written.
it is. It's there's so much to it in the story. It's so rich and lived in, and this world feels so fleshed out. But then
Mm-hmm.
the art so accurately portrays the moment, and just the level of the caliber of the art is mind blowing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Bree, the introduction here where we're seeing Bobby's dad, and he's like shouting in what we can see now is German, but like the way that it's cropped and cut at first, it was hard to tell whether he was speaking in German or whether he was speaking something
Possessed.
entirely inhuman. Like,
um,
what did you think of these opening scenes?
Man, I like you guys said, it went way different than I thought it was gonna go. I thought it was not really gonna go action. I thought it was gonna be another one of those stories where, because I didn't realize it was his dad at the beginning quite yet. I thought it
Yeah.
was this monster who they built, and he keeps accidentally showing up at the wrong time or accidentally hurting people, and then the
Mm.
repercussions of that. I thought it was going to be another one of those, and it was way different.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, I got the vibe when I was first reading this page that it was just like some local, get off my lawn, gun-toting, sit on the porch with his
Mm-hmm.
shotgun neighbor, and then to only revisit this scene later and find out that it's actually his father.
Yeah. Heavy. It drops you right in.
It
That's
does.
just how it starts.
Yeah, it's it's a lot, and like it's such a tragic tale too, because like yeah, in this instance, this no, I'm gonna say it right now because there's no way we're gonna be able to talk about this without spoilers. So if you haven't read Monster, go pick it up. It's linked below. Read it and come back because there's stuff that like I need to talk about to make sense of what's happening here that is gonna be spoiler territory. So go and get the book and come back, and then
Pop off.
we'll talk about the rest of it. But it's such a tragic story. Like this man is a monster in this moment, but he wasn't always.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Like a
like
kid
Mm-hmm.
finding
died.
out how he became this
Mm-hmm.
was so upsetting.
Oh my God. Yeah. Once you finally get there, I remember like getting to if you're talking about the, the soldiers that come upon the scene way down the road in, the sort of the end of the book, I kind of was like, oh my God, here it comes. There was
Yeah.
definitely like
Yeah,
bracing myself.
right? Because they'd been hinting throughout the book at
Yeah.
how before he came back, is it Tommy Bailey? I've forgotten right now.
The husband,
Yeah.
the dad.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. How
Is it? Yeah.
Tommy was
Bobby's
being
his son. Yeah.
held
Yeah.
in a psychiatric facility in Berlin for insert reason here for years on end. Like after the war finished, he was still there for many years before he came home. I was just like, what happened to him over there?
Yeah.
I was like, did he defect? Are they pumping? Is this a lie? And they're pumping him for information? And then we truly find out what happened, and it was terrible. And meeting Bobby, the 14 years after that incident, and finding out that he lost his eye from that,
Mm-hmm.
that was heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's intense. It's so intense. It's it's like the only I just think about it as I can't help but think about it as like a filmmaker or producer. It's like, okay, how if someone did bring this to a network, how you could build this thing out. And I think, maybe HBO in its heyday, the, now unfortunately just Max, although I guess you can find HBO within the Max of it all, may be able to bring something like this to fruition as a filmed piece. But you kind of have to go there. I mean, it's so intensely gory, way beyond the work of Alan Moore, way beyond anything. The most intense stuff I read in heyday comics, Watchmen and beyond. The Killing Joke, and just it's way more intense. And as I'm saying, this is someone who hasn't read anything Walking Dead, but I that's where my mind goes. And I you could just tell that he was just like, I'm just gonna write the story that's been haunting me, and let it spill out of me. There's no way you also like draw 400 pages and not just have this thing living with you for as long as it was. Like I wouldn't be surprised if Barry Windsor-Smith spent the last 12 to 14 years just on this thing, and it's evident that he did.
Yeah 100%. This story has definitely been following Barry from project to project, floating in the ether.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think like you hit the nail on the head about how intense it is. I think what makes it so intense is how human it is. Like for the most part, it's not fantastical powered beings that are doing the destruction and the beating and it's just regular old people who can only handle a regular old person amount of damage.
Yeah. The monsters within us, kind of a message, right?
Yeah.
Definitely for viewers, like I would bring tissues. Like maybe I'm just sensitive, but I feel like the only book I've ever cried more to was Les Mis, and so
Wow. Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
totally.
no, I would agree. I more got like this feeling throughout so much of the book, the rising and the Jesus. But you definitely be prepared that you might cry because it is tragic.
heart-wrenching.
And like you were talking about it before, Bri. like the connectedness of this world. Like we're introduced to this military guy and Bobby here, and then to find out how they're connected
Yeah.
was just mind blowing. And then like everyone else that they're connected to.
Mm.
Ugh. The Janet, the wife, was the one that just my heart. Oh my
I
goodness.
know. All
And
these
then
letters.
Elias, I was just like, oh man, you
Right?
guys aren't connected how you think. Like, oh man.
Yeah. Yep. And like like the when it was revealed that Janet had met this military guy when he was just a little boy and like
And he
had
thought that she was like a beautiful apparition. I mean, it's just the connectedness, and then with his own daughter having an actual kind of a sensitivity, a shining in a way.
yeah.
It's really something
And that's
epic. It's an epic.
yeah, I like the way that they did that as well. In like it wasn't just your Professor X, psychic manifestation. It was
Yeah.
it was more in those like cultural stories of the vision, the touch, the knack,
Yeah.
those more
Yeah.
folklorish abilities.
Yeah.
Worth talking about that device. I mean, too, it's we've seen so many ghost stories and interesting takes on ghost stories and psychic stories, and from everything from The Shining to The Haunting of Hill House, from Mike Flanagan. And in this, you kind of see almost like the mechanics of it with Elias's daughter, and I thought that was really satisfying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
It
got little
reminds me
hints of how this might work, and then sorry, Bri.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and I just love that.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say it reminds me of like shaman traditions. Like I don't know if you've read about them, but like they
Mm,
believe in a lot of cultures that it's passed down from family member to family member
yeah.
spiritually. So you just pass it on to the next generation. But,
Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah, I really liked
mhm.
that. And like the thing that I found so interesting especially was like this man has a certain amount of ability, he can talk to his dead grandmother's spirit. He can glean some things that are occurring, but the raw power that his daughter possesses
Mhm,
at such a
mhm,
young age was astounding.
mhm. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, like not only could she see things that are happening right the hell now, but like within pretty much moments of her power manifesting, she could possess people like miles and miles and miles away.
Yeah,
Like not
yeah,
just influence them, fully take them over.
yeah.
I wonder if it was her openness because I feel like she wasn't rejecting the power, where like Elias kind of had the wife who was like, we
Mm.
don't talk about it. We don't. So I wonder if he could have been capable of more, but just suppressed it so hard
Yeah,
to
that
like.
could be a point. And that sort of is that commentary on today's society as well, is that like the cultural practices are, frowned upon because of how society views things. And, I know I myself could view some of that stuff a little bit as like an allegory for being neurodivergent as well.
Mm,
Like
mhm, mhm.
a lot of
Totally.
neurodivergent people, it's the autistic psychic ability is joked about sometimes, and just like like the vibe, being able to pick up on the vibe, because we spend so long learning to recognize patterns of behavior, but
Mhm.
are like neurodivergent people are sort of ostracized and sometimes
Mm,
punished for that, and for
yeah.
not reacting to those things the way that society thinks they should. So like there's a little bit of that with the psychic power sort of thing happening there. There's quite a few different allegories for just and just straight up stories of disability and how society treats you within this book, which was really
Mhm.
interesting.
Mhm. Yeah, completely. I just to briefly touch on the daughter's possession and that psychic ability of it. You can imagine the greater world, like the continued saga of this, where it does move into a grounded, tough, grittier, say, superhero story. It's like almost like what Shyamalan sort of touched on with Unbreakable, for lack of a
Mm.
better comp, where, you know, these are real people who really have these abilities in a world where horrific things happen more often than not at the hands of very human people. And I really appreciated that, and kind of I found that so satisfying in all stories when, and it's such a hard line to toe tonally, but when you can create a grounded genre narrative, especially a grounded, like, again, for lack of a better term, like a superhero story, you can pick, okay, you have psychics, you have the superhuman brute, you have the violent kind of Nazi villain with the hook hand, but it's all for it's all quite grounded, and I so appreciated that. I think that's my most satisfying or satisfied takeaway
Yeah,
with monsters.
I would definitely agree with a lot of those points. The the nightmare that McFarland had after sending
Oof.
Bobby.
Yeah.
That thankfully
That was
that is
the
one of the
first
left-hand
image where I
pages.
was like, okay, that's gonna be this kind of book.
Yeah,
Like this.
yeah, right. Like I wasn't sure exactly what was happening there until it's slipped to the next page and he woke up in a start, but it was like, what is going on here?
Mm-hmm. It's gonna be that type of story.
Yeah, and so it's absolutely the most intense book I think I've ever read, but it's such a gorgeous book in terms of visuals and such a human story while also dealing with such fantastical elements. I would recommend anyone that thinks that they've got the capacity to deal with those intense topics
Yeah.
to read it 100%. Like, no judgment if it's too much for you. That's 100% valid. It is a lot. It was a
It
lot.
goes hard, but it's, if you it's still let it be said. It is a don't be mistaken. It's a work of art.
It is.
It is a complete work of art that, I
Yeah.
think deserves to be devoured.
It is a beautiful book. It's such a touching story while also being so horrific. Like the
Mhm.
story of the special agent and Bobby's mom and
Yeah.
how that all went down. And
Mhm.
and again, like, I hope you're not still hanging around if you haven't read the book yet, because it's spoiler time. But that final scene
Yeah.
where the ghost of the special agent rejoined with the ghosts of Bobby and his mom,
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
can finally be happy in the
Yeah.
afterlife.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
With the psychic tricklings of the of like Tommy's previous kind of energy still
Yeah.
percolating, which is really, really interesting. Again, so impactful in this medium. It's like you cannot take it for granted. It just like trained me, like it hit me like a train, just in how impactful that was as a device.
Yeah, it was intense. It was a beautiful ending. And like you said, like, that being framed by the psychic residue of Tommy's violence was a fantastic juxtaposition. And I like that at least a little while before, by showing McFarland in the house, they did drop that deep lore that the ghosts aren't bound to the place that they died. They and whether that's just McFarland because he was born with the power, or whether that's all ghosts in this world, I'm not sure about. But it gives me hope that once they come to terms with their fate, they can leave this cursed place and go somewhere more peaceful.
And Bobby being a boy again made me happy, because I feel like even once he was a monster, that boy was inside the monster
Yeah.
the whole time.
Yeah, I feel like Bobby had been frozen because of the trauma that he experienced. Even as an adult, he obviously, like, he was going to join the military because he hadn't moved past that and didn't know what else to do.
Yeah, still so infantile, which made it all the more tragic, and yet satisfying in the end, to that degree that the family could really be together.
Exactly. Well, we're sort of approaching sort of the point where we would wrap up. It's been a pleasure to talk about both of these books with both of you. Bri, do you have any final thoughts on Monsters?
Just, I highly recommend it. Again, I'd never push anything that could be too much for people. Like, I still have not to this day finished Clockwork Orange, so I totally understand if something's too much for you. Totally acceptable, but it's, like you guys have said, a beautiful work of art, and I think I read somewhere it took him like 3 decades to make it, which to me as an artist, I'm like, that's a lot of time to put into one project. So really beautiful, beautiful masterpiece.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine spending that long on a single project myself as an artist either. Like that's a lot of work. And if I remember, Barry primarily works traditionally too, so that's a lot of paper.
Mhm.
Like the stack.
Phenomenal undertaking.
Yeah. And Josh, any final thoughts on the book from you?
Just doubling down on that, it's a work of art, not to be afraid. It's definitely worth it, especially if you like your books to go hard.
Yeah. Yep, 100%. Bri, where can people find you, and what else have you got in the future that people can watch out for that you're allowed to talk about?
So I'm on Instagram and Twitter as Bri Tippetts Art. I don't have anything huge right now, just kind of making some one-ofs and writing some ideas down, but nothing huge right now.
Yep, that's cool. If you do get anything else that gets announced or is coming out this year, let me know, and I will drop that in the links below because I am excited to see what comes next for you. I loved Darla, and I just can't wait to see what else comes out. And Josh, what have you got on the horizon that you're allowed to talk about?
Well, there's a tentative job floating around for September, but I'm in all 3 guilds right here in the States, WGA, SAG, and DGA. And other than the DGA's potential ratification, I'm technically on strike right now. I'm certainly not writing.
That makes sense.
So, just supporting in solidarity with my WGA and SAG homies. And it remains to be seen whether or not the DGA will follow through and ratify this, like historic deal, which isn't that historic, but, remains to be seen. But just hoping that these like tech companies do the right thing.
Yeah,
and,
me too.
We end this swiftly in favor of the people that are literally creating and responsible for the fabric of culture. Like storytellers are the reason why these people have boats, yachts.
Yep, 100%. And where can people find you, Josh?
Just at Josh Ruben on Instagram or josh'smindhouse.com. That's my website where I pretty much put everything, including the Darla pre-order and all that good stuff.
Perfect. And I will link the Darla website to get that below. And of course, if you're like me and your first exposure to Josh was Josh making funny noises on Gamechanger, go check out the latest season of Make Some Noise, because I've seen a couple of previews. I haven't watched the season premiere yet, but I've seen a couple of the short previews, and it looks like it's going to be a boatload of fun.
Oh, it's so fun. On Dropout TV, that's right.
That's right. The only streaming platform that we still pay for is Dropout TV.
Amazing.
So thank you both for your time so much. And of course, to find me, you're going to want to look for No Capes Show on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, wherever you think. No Capes is on all good podcast places. And if you want to help support the show, quickest, cheapest, and easiest way for you is to like, share, subscribe, post about the show on Twitter, maybe leave us an Apple review or Spotify review. But also, you can check out my Patreon below, which I've just revamped for No Capes specifically. You can get early access to episodes. You can help us pick what books are going to be chosen from for a season. Like pick if we're going to do a sci-fi season or a horror season for season 5 and all that good stuff. And if you check out the Throne wish list as well, you can find things like new microphone arms and a set of Rode Go microphones for me to interview people at conventions and stuff like that I could otherwise not really afford. But if anyone wants to drop $10 to help me achieve that goal, that helps me keep making this show bigger and better. And the more that you share the show, the more that Age of Radio and the Geek Collective, my brand new podcast network for this season, is going to love me. So I'd appreciate any help that y'all can give us. But I have been Sean Sunday. This has been No Capes, the show where we talk about creator-owned comics with creators who own comics. This has been my wonderful guest, Bri Tippetts. This has been my other wonderful guest, Josh Ruben, and we have been talking about Darla and monsters. Check all the links and information below. And till then, we'll see you next time. Keep reading comics.
Gonna have to like double.
Yeah. There we go.
Thank you so much for having us.
Of
Thank
course,
you.
it's my pleasure. Thank you both for your time. I hope that good things keep coming your way for the rest of the year.
Same to you. Same to you.
All right. Keep reading comics, guys.